everybody to our webinar COVID-19 SME Policy Response with a special focus on Central Eastern Europe. The introduction statement or the welcome and opening speech will be given by Mr. Ingo Friedrich. He was a long time serving MEP in the European Parliament, also the Vice President of the European Parliament, an expert in so many fields, the Honorable President of SME Europe of the EVP. Ingo, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you for organizing this very interesting and important meeting. Yes, I'm very happy that we all are together, especially the senators, the members of parliament, and all our interesting SME managers. And yes, we have a lot of questions in this area and in these times. For instance, is there really an expectation that the social and business climate will be changed? Will there really be a new form of home offices all over the world, or will it stop when this crisis is finished? Second question, who really will be winner or loser of this development? And this is a very, for the taxpayers, very important questions. Shall be there a tax to shift the advantages from the winners to the losers? I will tell the answer from my point. There should be no additional and no taxation concerning COVID-19. And what is the end of this process? Where will be, could it be that COVID-19, this virus, will go on in some areas of the world on and on? For instance, can it be theoretically that even next year we have a problem in Africa or in South America? Or even if Trump is re-elected, shall then the virus stay in the United States even in next year? And what is really now for our East European friends an intelligent reactions as a member of an SME management or the boss of a small business enterprise? How shall I now react to make my business fit for the future, to use this time of the crisis to make better my own business? And very important for the politicians, what shall be the best answers of the states or of the European Union to help our small business? Is only money a really good answer, or shall be other ideas to make easier bureaucratic structures to help small business to come along with all these problems? And more or less, not last question, but if there's a necessity to make once more a lockdown, let's say in some regional or smaller local area, there could be a new wave of the virus, and how then to manage to once more a lockdown? How to manage this, to make it regional and not to bring it a new big wave? So these are all questions which are very, very important. And last question is, what for my person, we have now high deficits, debts of the states of the European Union. In former times, we speak about million, then about billion, and now about milliards, and now about trillions. So there are huge, huge debts. Will ever be the possibility that these debts should be paid back, and who will pay back for these debts? You see, we have huge and lots of questions. So let's start the analysis. And I hope the first is Stefanitz, our member of parliament, our expert of small business, coming from East European country. What is your start to answer all these very complicated questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Inga, for great introduction, and regards from sunny Bratislava to the places all over the Europe. And I'm happy really to see all my friends being in good shape. First of all, let me say a couple of comments that currently we talk about SMEs. SMEs are facing a very, very difficult situation. We know that we are in economical crisis, probably the most difficult economical crisis since the Second World War. And countries which took very strong health measures, which were priorities, of course, now those countries, they face even more severe economical consequences. We know about that, and particularly those consequences are very much visible on our small and medium entrepreneurs, particularly in Central Europe, because Central Europe is very open. Many countries in Central Europe, they are very open economies, very much connected to our common European market. I know that short term, there were some measures which helped SMEs, like direct cash support or guaranteed loans by European investment banks, or even so-called Kurzarbeit, contribution to jobs position, deferred tax and social cost payments, and so on and so on. So some short-term measures that were in place. But as Mr. Friedrich has asked, I think, very, very principal questions, we have to look for the answers for those difficult questions and for basic fundamental solutions. In my view, I'd like to mention three points which are very important from my point of view. First, for recovery for SMEs. First one is to improve access to finance, and to not forget to build capital market union in the European Union. I think many SMEs, according to our survey, which we organized by SME Europe, they highlighted access to finance nowadays as priority number one. So we have to guarantee, we have to improve access to finance for SMEs. Second priority should be also single market completion. We shouldn't forget that single market has not been completed yet, and therefore we have to fight still against bureaucracy. We have to overcome those unnecessary burden on single market, and also to reduce administrative cost for companies, which is the best way how to do it is to complete finally our single market, particularly in the area of services, and also at the same time to build digital single market, because current COVID crisis showed us how digital infrastructure is important. Third point is that European Commission and as well European Parliament are coming nowadays with huge amount of money, so-called recovery fund, which must be spent wisely. And I think this is also the point which we have to focus on, how to spend this recovery fund. And my view is that we have to improve significantly infrastructure, significantly improve business environment for SMEs, and also we shouldn't forget about improvement of skills, which is very important for small and medium enterprises. So those should be the priorities: single market completion, access to finance, on also how to use recovery fund. Shortly coming back to Ingo's questions, how to pay debts, I think that's very important, and particularly now we know that there will be more money from European institutions like this recovery fund. So we have to focus on reforms and on the use of this package from long-term perspective. We have to prepare also our projection how to spend this money, but also how to pay this money back. So therefore we have to spend this package on sustainable reforms, which will help to generate our revenues in future. how to fit business into future, it was another question. I think everybody will be more cautious about cost, but everybody will be more digital. Therefore, once again, digital infrastructure is very, very important. So skills and digital infrastructure would be my answer. Another point, no additional taxation. I fully agree with that. We shouldn't put additional taxes now, because government will tend, and not only government, also European Commission will tend to put additional taxes. There is a talk also about digital taxation and about some kind of common European taxes. I think it is not the best way. I think we should focus on better efficiency of current taxes rather than to add some new taxes. So our focus should be always on better use of current taxation and potentially to cut taxes rather than to add new taxation on our businesses. And will be situation changed? Of course, the whole world will be changed. The whole business model will be changing. I think it is not the end of globalized world. I think the world will be even more globalized, but more digitalized, and there will be more and more kind of opportunities for businesses, particularly in digital world, which can be good opportunities for SMEs. So digitalization, new green technologies, those will be also priorities for SMEs to grow in near future. Thank you very much. So back to Henrik or Horst, if you are with us.
I take over. Thank you, Mr. Stefanetz. Very good speech, also introduction, very good by Mr. Friedrich. Yeah, to sum it all up, I think you're so far hit some good points. And the main point, probably cut bureaucracy for SMEs, easier finance or access to finance, increase or develop further the single market. And yeah, maybe the chance now that now Horst is joining us. Let me finish the sentence. The chance is that since we are maybe getting less global, supply chains will actually grow within Europe and move from China maybe to Eastern Europe. Who knows? Yeah, Horst, the floor is yours. But yeah, let me give out the word directly to Mr. Milosevic. He was long-term member of the Croatian Parliament and is also president of SME Global of the IDU, which is the umbrella of the organization of all center-right democratic parties globally. Mr. Milosevic, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Henrik, and good afternoon to everybody, and much longer in business and SME sector than in politics. So I've been in business since 1989, which is now more than 30 years. I would just want to start by saying that I don't want to sound pathetic, but in the mid to long run, I think that the future of SMEs around Europe, particularly in Central Eastern Europe, will have direct impact on both social and political developments, because now after 9 years in politics, I tend to less and less believe there is democracy without free market economy and vice versa. And I think really the fundamentals of any free market economy is really the small and medium-sized enterprises. And I would want to touch today's topic on 3 levels. First level is financial. Ivan already mentioned most of what I wanted to say, so I will not take a long time, but it's obvious that the direct job subsidies, support from the national governments or EU, plus guarantee schemes for the SMEs and non-refundable structural or the next generation subsidies will be absolutely necessary if we want to keep the SME sector alive, and then hopefully in a year or so thriving. So that's very brief, as Ivan really worked on that very well. Second level I wanted to address is the fair chance and fair competition for the SMEs. Under that, I think on one side that there should be obviously cutting the red tapes around Europe, even more so in countries of Central Eastern Europe, and smart regulation on one side, but that's not enough. Somebody already mentioned the Chinese. I have been trying to compete with Chinese for 20 years of my life. And you know, if your competition gets 18% direct cash subsidies on export invoice, then it's not easy to compete. And if these guys, if their workers sleep in the factories minimum 6 nights per week, sometimes even 7, I mean, how do you really compete with this? So when I hear these days is buzzword around Brussels reindustrialization, I couldn't agree and support more. But it cannot go as we want and plan if we don't sit with Chinese and make the playground, to put it, if not the same, at least similar to everybody. And under this my last topic, the taxation, I'm never for new or the higher taxation, but I have to make 2 remarks under taxation. First, I was not very convinced when my own government, so the center-right government in Croatia, couple of years back, for the first time split the profit tax much lower for the SMEs. At the time it was 12 and 18% for the big ones. I said, guys, that's not fair. We have percentages because that's how we should treat everybody the same. But I'm, to be honest, less and less convinced about that. So I think we should really consider on the European level, what is it about corporations and the SMEs, and there is obviously 2 different worlds. That's 2A, and 2B on the taxation is, I've been discussing last couple of months in this kind of webinars, and a lot, by the way. I'm chairing the European committee in the parliament, so we had the COSAC meetings around European Union and national parliament meetings. And we have discussed a lot on this taxation. I mean, there are some taxes that most of the European national governments cannot really get to, which is mostly the big corporations in digital, big data, and similar sectors. I strongly oppose any idea from Brussels that any sector, banking or any other, should be getting some kind of the tax which is not connected to profits. Same goes for this. But I think there are sectors, they are very strong, very powerful, that typically under the legal frameworks avoid to pay taxes around Europe. That was my last point on the taxation. And third level, on the SMEs, I put it in kind of structural, fundamental, because what I think whole European Union, particularly the SEE, lacks is this entrepreneurial culture. You know, I think we should do anything in our power. This is long-term goal, but I think that we should also tackle the issues, not only short-term, mid-term, but also long-term. We must improve our education systems and our culture of not making mistakes. I love Americans because it's always easy and possible to make mistake, and then you are not fined or you are not doomed if you make mistake. Whoever does business, we all make mistakes. I make my mistake in my family every day, and I'm married for 21 years happily with my wife, and I still make mistakes. So I think we need to do some work on these cultural changes, that if we want European Union to change in the direction where we really appreciate the success, there is no success without making mistakes. And my last point is coming back to the money. Money is really important these days. I appreciate that, but money is still for me just a tool. And the Commission and everybody involved, European Parliament, all of us politicians need to think of it as merely as a tool. More important than the tool, you know, we need to have a clear vision, clear leadership, and very, very clear common values. If we have these 3, I think then the Winston Churchill once said, you know, never miss a good crisis. So I think that might be actually this crisis, but if we don't want to miss it, it cannot be only about bureaucracy and money. Money is great, we need it, it's a great tool these days, but I think we should always keep our view on these 3: vision, leadership, and the values. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Domagoj, for your speech. Yeah, especially like the part about China, we need to level the playing field. This has been a issue with China for 40 years since the opening. Also, the entrepreneurial culture that is lacking in Europe when you compare it to the US or China, especially our generation or my generation. I'm 27. We want to work only 30 hours a week, but then we have 1.4 billion Chinese that work 6 hours a week, 6 days a week, 12 hours a day, and we want to work 30. So it's just then a matter of time until they surpass us. So very good words. Thank you for this. And the next speaker is Vladimir Danilov. He's the executive director and member of the management board at Phones in Bulgaria. Mr. Danilov, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Heinrich, and thank you very much for the opportunity to join to this discussion today, to hear your opinions, and of course to be able to share our opinions. Kind of preparing for this discussion today, I prepared a few slides. If you allow me to share my screen.
Yeah, sure. Wait.
Yeah, I'm going to be glad to present, but pretty much what I heard from Mr. Stefanets and Mr. Milosevic and the questions that we heard from Mr. Friedrich, I hope that I'm going to be able to put or cover with those slides.
You should be able to share it now.
Yeah, can I share now? Yeah, sure. Yeah, definitely. And preparing actually for today, I hope that I'm going to be able to move it. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, preparing for the session today, I wanted to just stress out a couple of numbers. I'm sure that you've heard lots of numbers and the audience heard lots of numbers in the past couple of months, but see, like 500 million people globally, there is a threat for them falling into poverty. Imagine that's actually 7% of the global population, and imagine that could be around 5 or 7% of the population of the Europe, which could be very big, like social burden for their own. Also, the anticipated following the global trade comes to somewhere between 13 and 30%. Imagine how important is that for European small and medium enterprises, which really are, let's say, very used to use the benefits of the single market of Europe. And I agree with the ideas of Mr. Stefanets. And the estimated drop of foreign direct investment is between 30–40%, which brings the world probably 10 years behind in terms of foreign direct investments. And of course, it's not a surprise, those numbers that we see. The decline that we have in the global and the European Union, and of course, also the Bulgarian economy, the drop of around 8 or 10% ain't gonna be, or is going to be barely recovered in the next year. So pretty much we are going to be suffering in the next couple of years, and probably now the fall and the winter, the crisis is going to be at its peak. Probably the industries that were greatly affected in Bulgaria are probably the same industries that are affected in Europe. So on the left-hand side, you see industries that depend on contact, personal contact or travel. And on the right-hand side, those are industries that are on much more advanced level in terms of digital transformation, or remote teams can perform the job. So we can really, the industries on the left-hand side could see the business models or the technologies that the industries on the right use, so they can adapt in the new paradigm, the post-COVID or under the COVID situation. So here I'm going to be pretty much cover some of the topics that have been already mentioned. On the row above, we have two type of measures that are taken from the governments, the fiscal and the financials. Here we are covering the topic of making the capital easier to be accessed by the small and medium enterprises. So those are the measures that our government introduces, the European Commission, European Union, and I believe all governments within Europe and globally are introducing right now, all the instruments, the state aid, etc., to support our small and medium enterprises. On the right-hand side, those are all the easing up of the legislations that offer the flexibility necessary to the national budgets to support the economy and to respond in a coordinated manner to the impact of COVID-19 pandemic. Those are decisions to issue specific temporary state aid framework to expedite public support to companies, or those are just some recent extensions of the framework to cover support for research, testing, and production relevant in the fight against the COVID-19 pandemics. So those two measures are more valid for governments. But on the bottom row, we see from one side digital transformation, which should be taken into consideration from governments to reduce the administrative burden, to make the services digital, and to prepare the ecosystem for the new way of living. But also digital transformation, it's not the job or responsibility only for the governments, but digital transformation should be also considered by the small and medium enterprises and the companies in general, because pretty much all companies, they've been aware about the benefits that they can gain or the competitive advantages they can achieve by introducing the Industry 4.0, etc. Ideas. But now, since the crisis came very acute, probably this transformation is going to happen in a very fast manner, which is good. Companies are going to suffer, but this is something that we need to do to open up campaigns and to make really widely available the tools for digital transformation for small and medium enterprises. And of course, on the right-hand side, on the bottom row, this is the economic shift. Probably all the plans that we've had earlier in terms of government or the investment plans of companies, they should be reconsidered now, because probably what we have been planning in the pre-COVID era probably ain't going to be valid in the new era, because probably the business and the governments and the world is going to exist in another mode. So we need to really reconsider the plans that we've been drafting earlier, and probably we should stop following some of those plans. Of course, those are some examples of financial support that our country introduced. I believe many of, all the governments introduced that. And here in this graph, this slide, I wanted to share with you, this is, those are some of the vehicles that we have in Bulgaria already. They were launched by also by our organization. They were not created for the COVID situation, but it's very good that we have now, or we have them now. So those are different fund managers that are distributing money for companies at different stage of development. You see here that we have the pre-seed, seed phase, and also for some mature companies. Those are some equity investments or guarantees or micro loans. So I'm repeating again, we didn't do those instruments for the COVID situation because we didn't know that there's going to be COVID, but it's great that we have them now. So that's something very positive that we can share from Bulgaria, that we've been able to have those financial instruments that are coming in very good benefit right now under the COVID. Of course, can the pandemic be an opportunity? Of course it is. As Mr. Milosevic just mentioned, we will be fool if we don't use this pandemic as an opportunity. It's already clear that our focus should be over innovation, like being virtual or introducing technology and ICT technologies within our business. But probably as an upside of the current situation, there's going to be reforms that probably we've been procrastinating or executing in a slower manner. And now we need to really do those reforms very fast. I'm talking about reforms in the healthcare, education, event management, etc. And even some of the most conservative industries like banking, etc. They're going to be a reform, and probably there's going to be a good boost for fintech companies that are really reinventing the financial landscape. I want to also share some of the positive examples that we had in the last months. Bulgaria was under the lockdown after 13th of March. And then a very intensive dialogue between the local government of Sofia was initiated, and also between the industries of Bulgaria and the government of Bulgaria, because all the packages that have been crafted, the anti-COVID packages that supports business, they've been crafted together with the business. And our belief is that business knows best what are the challenges on the borderline. They know what is the dynamic within their industries, and they know what the government should or might do in order to help them to, let's say, survive now when we're talking about COVID, or develop for their own. Our observation is that not every time the question is about money, although the access to money is very important. I agree with the colleagues before, but sometimes business needs, let's say, updated regulation, easing up regulation, or let's say a system that is more up to date to 21st century and 2020. So those are some positive examples. More dialogue with business in order to craft the best solutions for business again. So thank you very much for this was my input, and I agree with the colleagues before. I'm going to be glad to share more from our side. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dainlov. Could you stop the screen sharing?
Sure.
All right, thank you. Yeah, thank you for your good points, and especially for the deep insight of the Bulgarian response to COVID. Yeah, like the previous speakers, we need less bureaucracy, and yet this crisis is a chance. Crisis is a ladder, and maybe when looking to the digital development in Europe, this could be a blue pause where we just like break with old traditions, old habits, and just move into a new digital era. Yeah, the next speaker is Mr. Marcin Nowacki. He is the Vice President of the Union of Entrepreneurs and Employers, which is the largest SME organization in Poland. He's very pro-entrepreneurship. Yeah, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Henrik. Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, let me share what was as a policy response, what was done here in Poland. The major tool or instrument we could experience as SMEs is the so-called financial shield. So that was the tool for liquidity, dedicated mainly to SMEs. Now it is also accepted and notified by the European Commission to be open for large businesses. But so far, thanks to that tool, more than 300,000 companies got quite an easy access to finance, and roughly about 15 billion euro was transferred to SMEs. 1/3 of it to micro companies, and the rest to small and medium-sized companies. This financial tool must be at least partly returned by companies, which is good in my opinion. I believe that in order to have stability and smart decisions at corporate and business levels, we need to repay at least part of that funds. But at the end of the day, that was very, very helpful to have rather calm situation, and not as many as expected unemployed people. So far, just less than 200,000 employees lost jobs, and now it goes up again. Discussing the SME policy responses, I believe the question now is how we could link the new recovery funds at EU level and member states level with smart regulation and fiscal reforms. Because it is definitely the time to look at all public flows and spending in order to balance financial stability at domestic level. Of course, it is not possible to do it this year, but still this kind of thinking must be in place. And I don't think this is so obvious for everybody, for all politicians, both at European and domestic levels, that we should really think of public, also of the public spending. There are more important issues to finance and less important. And we should definitely structure and prioritize public spending. Then I believe we need to discuss, that was interesting for the lockdowns. We have observed in many countries, but temporarily, some efforts to lower bureaucracy and regulations. This is very interesting. That if we see as the public and politicians that the situation is critical, somehow we are able to limit regulation and to skip some of the burdens for businesses. Now I think we should discuss, of course, mostly at domestic level, what can be left for the future from this activity. I believe that some of the burdens should be kept away for the future, not just for the pandemic period, but for the future. If we agreed, at least here in Poland, that many issues should not be now expected by the public sector or administration, then we perhaps should keep it this way and build more competitive advantages for Polish and European companies. I would also think of having in mind all the public aid that was provided or is still open for companies. I would also think of an access or easy access to commercial finances for SMEs. As we see, and this is also happening in Poland, low interest rates and reactions of banks to what is happening with the interest rates. I would rather expect that we will have less interest of banks to finance SMEs easily with commercial products. They rather look at how to buy public bonds that are widely now issued. But in the long run, we need to make sure that SMEs have an easy access to commercial financing, not to the public money, but to commercial products. And that should be also something to discuss definitely domestically, but perhaps also at the European level, because it's always easier for banks to finance large businesses, to finance state-owned companies, to finance infrastructure projects, and so on. And we've had a challenge to get financing for micro and small companies for many years, especially liquidity funds. It was almost impossible to get proper liquidity lines through the commercial products. So I will look at that. Then, as we were able to freeze some unnecessary regulations at domestic levels, perhaps we could do the same with large regulations at the European level, or perhaps we could withdraw from some really bad activities or initiatives such as the new social pillar and the European minimum wage. All those issues are really harming businesses and harming European competitive advantages. And I'm afraid we spoke a couple of times throughout our webinars to the European Commission, and I got even the answer from Commissioner Schmidt on that issue, on the social pillar. And unfortunately, that they want to go with it, and they want to keep the even the timeline of working on that proposal. I don't think this is a good approach with regards what is happening around. I agree with Mr. Stefanec and also Mr. Milosevic that new taxation or some sectoral taxation is a bad idea these days. I would rather expect to limit public spending. But I agree that some differentiation of corporate taxation regarding small and large is positive. We also have that differentiation here in Poland up until 1.2 million euro of the yearly turnover. You have the flat corporate tax at the level of 9%, and then you have also flat 19% corporate tax. And that works well. I don't see, for now, I can see that it is positive, and it has moved number of really small companies from individual businesses into limited companies, which is good if you look at the stability of business and some risks that individuals can take unnecessarily, not having limited companies. I also agree with a level playing field. We are, this is, every time we discuss European regulation or new initiative, we must think and remember that this is dedicated to legal businesses, to businesses that are in line with European structures and European laws. This is not the case for a number of Chinese players. This is not the case for e-commerce, which is totally out of the system at domestic and European level. And it's a good time to really face it. It's a shame that we couldn't do it before with the US administration, to do it somehow together, having e-commerce as a first, I believe, easy way to structure this game. But it is something to be done now, and we cannot wait any longer. And the last thing I wanted to mention is the digitalization that was also presented by Vladimir. But I would focus now on the digitalization of the public sector, because at least in Poland, the full lockdown we experience here has shown how different the public sector and the private sector are. I mean, the private sector was able to adjust to the situation rather easy and fast. It wasn't a real trouble. But if we look and compare it to the public sector, that was not the case. And our recommendations now, some of them, how to use the new funds from the recovery plan. These are to help the public sector to digitalize and to be somehow more in line what is happening in the private sector. And even looking at similar schools, one private or which is managed by the NGO, and the second, which is fully public, we could observe that, you know, it's the public one is just not working for weeks. Almost nothing was delivered to students. So if we want to go further with digitalization and with the digital sector, especially for SMEs, we must have a partner in the public sector. And so, at least in Poland now, this is one of the challenges we face. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcin. Yeah, you're totally right. With the lowered bureaucracy, that also we are able to do it, or the governments are able to do it, but it also shows that the government and the public knows and believes in the importance of entrepreneurs, and also trust them to turn this crisis around. It shows this great responsibility or great role of entrepreneurs, SMEs, in enterprises within our society. And I wish we would see it more often, like outside of a crisis, not just when it's hitting the fan. And the next speaker is Martin Kubala. He's the managing director of Hewlett Packard Enterprises for East South Europe, as well as Africa, I believe. It's also nice to see that we have a large enterprise here with us today. SMEs are your suppliers, your vendors, and from my understanding, it's an ecosystem. It's not small against big enterprises. It's an ecosystem, and of course there are differences, but this is business. But yeah, Mr. Kubala, the stage is yours.
Hi, good afternoon. So greetings from Vienna. It was a pleasure to hear about the importance of digitalization of all this big data and the stuff, because this is exactly what we are busy with. So I am representing Hewlett Packard Enterprise as a managing director for East South Europe and Africa, which is in fact the CIS countries, all Balkan down to Malta and Africa. So all the, I would say, kind of problematic countries. So doing it 29 years now, so I believe I can share quite a lot of experience as well from these countries. And you know, a little bit what we are doing, because very often Hewlett Packard Enterprise is mixed with Hewlett Packard. That was a split in 2015, so we have nothing to do with PCs and printers. It's all about the data center, edge, networking, big data, artificial intelligence. So exactly the part, kind of $30 billion business, which is currently very much needed. And I have to tell on the question if we are very much affected by Corona, yes, but it's on two sides, yeah, because we were never experiencing the issue which we've hit it, in fact, in March, April, where simply there was still a demand. And the demand was just different one that was not really coming as well from SMB. For us, SMB is 40–50% of our business. But the rest is really the B2G, so governments, telcos, banks, big oil and gas companies, or big manufacturing companies. But we were hit on the supply chain very much. So this is kind of a new situation that you cannot supply to the customers anything, because the factories are closed or the supply chain doesn't work. Yeah, you take Africa, there was for a few weeks no cargo shipment to Africa. Then our shipment company to Africa is DHL, and DHL was using a smaller planes where our big racks were not fitting it. And this was, and you have projects which are sometimes even really life-saving. So we were really prioritizing very much the healthcare, sometimes education, but very much the security and healthcare. So we had even some examples where we were shipping by helicopters equipments directly from the factories, and we have factories as well in Central Europe. We have a server factory in Czech Republic. So directly by helicopters to the customers in Central Europe from the factory. So quite a new situation. But as mentioned, so we have sales offices, about 100 countries which I am covering. but as well financial services in a number of countries. We have, of course, some thousands of support engineers and maintenance people. And as well, we have a share service center. So big centers, we mentioned Marcin in Poland, in Wrocław. We have the whole supply chain worldwide is managed from Bratislava, where we have kind of a center, and we have some thousand people in Bulgaria and Romania trying to really leverage the kind of a trend to move the people from India, which was a trend, let's say 10 years ago, to more closer nearshoring destinations. So reacting on the corona, yeah, we are impacted, but we are very dynamically changing the focus. So I would say the demand is there. We count that there will be no really a relief until summer next year, until the kind of a really an effective vaccination is not brought in. So I am calling now from Vienna office, and I am in the office which covers usually 200, 250 people. We were 3 here. So we count that 30-40% of people will not return to the office. We're not fired, but will stay working from home. So that's something which we are already starting to negotiate even with the landlords, because it's proving that the tools are working. Of course, then there is a social aspect, how to bring the people once a quarter, once a month, once a week together. You cannot do it so much in Kazakhstan as you can do it in Hungary. So, but this we really are very much focusing on that. And of course, the tools are working. You see now this is Zoom. We use Teams. We have our own phone stuff. We are even selling to the customers our kind of My Room solutions, which is for education, where you can share, you can vote, you can make quizzes on the tool. So this is something which very much is very much needed. And it's not only Corona. And I know we have countries where the oil price is making us crazy additionally to that. So the oil production countries, you know, Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, Algeria. On the other side, a number of countries are benefiting from the very low oil price or petrol price, which is very much kind of disinflation activation. So we can discuss really a very much a different approach from country to country. I have to say that sometimes it's very surprisingly that the, I would say, kind of more conservative countries are reacting as the first, which you would not expect, and the countries which are very much influenced by the virus. You take Azerbaijan, which still now you cannot go out to the street in Baku without getting an SMS permission, because it's very tough measures. But the country is investing in digitalization big time. It's very often as well security projects. So kind of Ministry of Interior and as well managing the funds and the distribution of funds, because you know, as was discussed, there is a number of funds available currently, very much focused not only on innovation, but very much on kind of saving the enterprises on and giving, paying for them loans to the employers and so on. So, but we still hope that it will be moved as well more to the innovation. And for example, Kazakhstan, and I was asked even to mention this type of the countries where the Digital Kazakhstan initiative, $2 billion put really in as well security, but very much in making the country competitive from the digitalization perspective. And regardless of oil price, and which Kazakhstan is very much hit as a production country, they are really spending money on that. You know, so this is how we are helping as well, because we have more than 1,000 partners, which are very often large partners or SMB partners selling to the end customers very much. So we did, you know, from the frequent flyer program. So we were writing off this year. So the status of the partner stays as well next year, regardless of their this year performance. So if there is a platinum partner, which is of course bringing special funds, special conditions for them, they will stay next year in that status. We were extending in number of countries, not in all countries, Just we are careful as well in some of the countries, but in number of countries we were extending the payment conditions, so we were adding 30 days or 60 days additionally, and trying with this to really help our loyal and good partners to survive. And actually, we see this is really a very, very tough situation currently. The business confidence just hit a number of countries, actually majority countries, a 45-year low, which is bad for B2B. We expect that we will have even tougher next year because the budgets will be eaten by different priorities and not really in investments. But that we see as well kind of big difference country by country. So having a lesson from the past, you can really get stronger out of the crisis, and that's exactly what we as a kind of developer enterprise we are trying to be there and to focus on that. That's it, and I am ready for any questions, and we can discuss any African countries. And I like as well the comments on Chinese. We are competing with Chinese, and this is, as Domaga was mentioning, not an easy. Actually, it's not a fight. You are in the different playground. You play football, they play rugby, or they play hockey, and you come to their field, and you are surprised that you are on ice, and there is not the ball, but there is something completely different. So, but I am more optimistic than I was a year ago, to be honest. It is when you find that actually whatever you do, they get always a way of being 20-30% cheaper. On the other side, there is a number of customers which are looking on the quality, which got a disappointment, which are afraid of security. So even in Africa, which was, and this is a big question even for a discussion on this topic, like because Europe, France, Spain is influencing the French-speaking part of Africa, using it as a production facilities, but the rest of Africa is given to Chinese. Totally given, and this is, I believe, a missed opportunity. On the other side, I see as a chance because that Africa is getting a lesson. It's not easy to work with Chinese. It's sometimes even not very, I would say, clean business, and so there is the significant opportunity. And of course, the virus in Africa is now really. Is a big question mark, because South Africa is a different playground. It's one of the most heated countries. Actually, it's the 4th largest amount of affected people in the world. But the rest of the Africa is very cautious. And if Nigeria would get infected with 200 million people and with a density Lagos, 23 million people living on a very, very dense environment, you cannot really isolate people. You cannot make a social distancing because people will die from hunger because they need to do their trade. And 40 or 50% of the business is unofficial. It's just their small business selling, buying, producing without taxes, without anything. You cannot really lock it down. So they are trying really very, very, and they do it very well. So we were afraid that it will be booming. It still keep Nigeria below 700 new cases a day now, and it looks like that they achieve plateau. But the price for that is huge. The country is completely locked down. You cannot even travel. You cannot bring there anything. So it's very difficult. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kubala. Thank you for your insights of the inner workings of a large enterprise, how they deal with COVID. Also, good insights about Africa. I think it's for us still an unknown field. I would give now the moderation to Mr. Horst Heitz. He is the Executive Director of SME Europe of the EPP. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And first, sorry that I was late, but in Corona crisis, it's very hard to get doctor appointments, or you have months to wait if you don't take it now, if this is offered or not. So sorry for this. I think this discussion is very valuable and I think also complicated. And if you have a focus on Central and Eastern Europe, First, I think what we have to discuss now, we're coming now to the discussion with our guests, also with the participants, and then to the conclusion of Michael Jäger. But I would like to start with one question. Is this really a good way of the European Union to think this is Eastern Europe, Central Eastern Europe, Nordic countries? Should we not rethink how we want to categorize the crisis of regions? Because if we see now how the different countries are affected, Croatia, expected by the Vienna Institute for International Economic Studies, minus 11% of the GDP, and Slovakia minus 9%, but Poland only minus 4%, and Czech Republic only minus 4.8%. So do we go down to Spain and to Germany? We have also different numbers. The countries are different hidden, but not in the same way by the regions, more by the sectors and the supply chains they belongs to. So if we start now the discussion, should we perhaps rethink how we tackle this crisis, that we say, have a look on the supply chains and have a look more on the regions which are depending on certain sectors, or is every member state a single fight and every member states need the same medicine? Perhaps who would like to start to answer? Perhaps Ivan Stefanec?
Yes, I can start. Thank you very much, Horst, for a question. So my first point would be definitely we need common European solutions. We are in common European market, so we need common solutions. And the answer is coming back to single market. It should work, should function, and also we have to complete it. As I tried to highlight in my opening contribution, we have to complete single market. I think the figures you mentioned also showed that countries which were hit more severe, I think there were countries who are more connected to single market. So they were more hit by closing borders basically, and countries also many countries they acted separately, and which was understandable, but the priority was just the health measures. Now everybody has to understand more and more that it is now economical issue. We are in economical crisis, so it must be taken into consideration, and also there must be some coordination in border opening. That's the point which we try to put on the table from European Parliament as well.
Thank you. I think this is a point that so may you connected and in the European Union, so more hard you were hidden by the measures, but seems also that you should be a little bit autark, if you say this like this, to be safer. But Poland did a lot of measures and were cutting the supply chains, but you are coming out very fast now. And also, if you see in the future, the rebounding should be 4.1% for 2021. It's very good, in fact. What Poland was different to the other countries like Slovakia?
That's true. First of all, the lockdown was introduced quite early in Poland, and we were even surprised with the scale of it. And it was done when most of other countries were still operating. But I think it was crucial to get at least for small micro companies and businesses that were not able to operate at all. It was crucial to get access to finance, and that was done together with banks. All the system was structured within the banking sector. And it was done in a really rapid way. That's first. Second, starting from or even early April, we were working together with the government and businesses on new standards and procedures of how we're gonna open specific businesses, such as hotels, restaurants, small services.
Oh, now we are frozen.
We had number of recommendations ready and widely discussed within businesses and the public sector. So it was very easy for us then to reopen the economy and specific sectors. And as I said before, the unemployment rate is still very low, and that's a surprise for us so far. On the other hand, we also hope that the unions and the public sector won't be too harsh on looking at full employment and expecting full employment based on the labor code, because today with the remote work, remote offices, it is in many ways, especially for small and micro companies, very difficult. And now we are almost fully open, so we can basically use all the services, and having the scale of the country and number of production facilities here that are now operating and able to export. We hope it's gonna stay this way. Of course, there are sectors that have learned from the crisis. For example, there is a specific expectation from the pharmaceutical sector here in Poland. At least we discussed here all the pharma companies that are present in Poland with production, regardless of the nationality and the origin of the capital. If they have the production facilities here in Poland, there is now a kind of common understanding and expectation of that business that they would get a stable and guaranteed access for to contract to get contracted by the state or for medicines. And I think this is a very interesting point, and that lesson perhaps
so I missed
the materials. I think this is a good point, that if there is a company, it might be Asian, American, or European present with the product, they should get some proper rights for that.
Thank you very much. So I think this is also an answer for the question or remark of a Slovakian entrepreneur, an SME owner, who said they're still waiting to get financial support by the government, and this after 6 months. And in the same time, you say it was key that the Poland reacted very fast and brought money on the table for the SMEs. So I think there we can see also a huge difference how fast governments and banks are acting differently in the member states. But we coming to another point, Domagoj, Croatia is very hard hitting. It's a country who's very depending on tourism. If we speak now about digitalization and so on, it's good and fine, but is this perhaps also the first push that countries like Croatia have really to rethink, to be not too depending anymore so much on tourism, that this is perhaps a problem also for the next 10, 20, 30 years? Please.
Thank you, Horst. As I said, never miss a good crisis. So this is the chance for my small country. Since many years, even before politics, I was always opposing this idea that we should all live to tourism. And then in the last 10 years, we have basically maybe 15 years, doubled our dependence on tourism. Official statistics range between 18 and 20% of the GDP, but trust me, unfortunately, if you add the indirect impact of tourism and the gray zone of all those people who are not paying taxes, small renters, etc., etc., I mean, I'm absolutely sure that the impact is more than 30%. So I would be very glad if what you have said, Horst, 11% drop in 2020 would be exact. We'll see. I have to say on the other side that the previous and most probably the future government with elections a week ago reacted very fast, and for Croatian circumstances and our debt, which is the biggest in Eastern Europe by far, public debt is, I don't know, close to 70%. Government was spending basically 500 euros for 60% of privately owned enterprises, their employees. So 500 euros per employee, which amounted to almost 60% of all employees in private sector. The only thing you needed to do in these 3 months is that you should prove that your revenues dropped, your sales dropped more than 20% compared to 2019. And by the way, I think that was a good move, because when I compared the amount spent, which is totally 1 billion euros versus billions of euros that we unfortunately spent because of our inefficient public sector, not privatization, corruption, etc., etc., I think it's the best spent money since I'm in politics last 9 years. So we shall see. The opportunity is really there. Agriculture, transport and logistics, particularly the railway, because we have both the Danube ports and we have Adriatic ports, and we have been building last 15-20 years only the highways, not the railways. With some cohesion funds it can be done, plus some of the reindustrialization. Our ministers typically count on, Volkswagen will come not to Turkey but to Croatia. I'm not counting on that, but Croatia doesn't need VW. We need the subcontractors. The SME from Germany subcontracting, or the jobs coming back from China to Eastern Europe, including Croatia, is good enough. That's what I have to say about that.
Thank you very much. I think this is an outlook. What has to be done? It's a question of infrastructure to make the right framework to grow, and also to not to depend on hopes. So to do something, to work on it by yourself.
If I may add, Horst, I mean, just two brief sentences. First, I mean, when we talk about digitalization, this is past. I mean, who is not aware that this is now, it was yesterday. I mean, that's beyond any question. Whether it's SME, whether it's big corporates, I mean, I think that's easy. But my second point that I forgot in the introduction, my government appointed the China state-owned company, Chinese Bridge and Railway Corporation, to build a bridge in southern Croatia for 300 million euros, 85% of that comes from Austria, Germany, France, and elsewhere. I think that's nuts. I mean, the government obviously chose the cheapest bid, but I think on the European level, we cannot really spend our taxpayers' money for the Chinese companies to build anything in Europe. I think that's just nuts.
Thank you. Perhaps we should be not so naive anymore in Europe. Fair competition must be done by both sides. But Mr. Kubala, perhaps if you speak about China, we heard a lot from Americans and also from analysts that this crisis can be also a chance for Central and Eastern Europe to take over parts of the supply chains from China or from other parts of Asia. That they say invest in Eastern Europe, it's good markets, good labor forces, and perhaps less democratic problems, less problems with pandemics, but also with many issues who are related with ethics, and so on. Is this perhaps really a rethinking, or is this additional? Is this only a dream, or it could become reality?
I don't know. I was always hoping that this is a very good opportunity. We are producing here, but in fact we are producing with a kind of franchise mode, subcontracting Chinese or Taiwanese companies and Foxtrons and whatever. So on the end, even if you make a production here, the Chinese will buy in the shares of that companies. So this is a, but of course this is an opportunity. I would say this nearshoring stuff is a very good opportunity, but no, in fact, then the Koreans, Chinese, Taiwanese will come here and will start to produce here. And so, is there a chance to fight with that? I believe not. There must be a fair competition. Of course, the compliance is a big topic. So this is one of the opportunities. But yeah, there will be a competition. There will be if everything will be clean and really compliant, and there will be a fair competition. There's no issue at all who owns the factory and how it is produced. But yeah, this is still a long way to go.
Thank you very much. And now we're coming also to the end, but we have also a special guest, Mr. Hohe now, who is the president of the taxpayers. Before I come to you, I want only to give you some numbers who was very worried about the Sparkassen and Raiffeisen banks. If we spoke about credits for SMEs, could lose 630 billions of credits who they gave to SMEs. In the best case, 117 billions. In the worst case, 630 billions. So if he's saying always fast money to the SMEs, bring money to the SMEs, but this taxpayers' money is also backed by taxpayer monies, don't we going in a way where we're coming to zombie SMEs, to strategies who are not strategies, because there will be not an end of this crisis like in the tourism sector in many parts, and that really the banks are collapsing, and in the end also the taxpayers are collapsing in the governments. What is the view of the taxpayers? The floor is yours.
You know, the problem for example, of the Sparkassen, of these Volksbanken is that with the zero negative interest rates, they will not earn money in some years. We made in one of the biggest Sparkassen research. If it's going along like now, then in 3 or 4 years we don't earn any money. But for example, the Sparkassen in the big towns, they have about 60–70% of all the private and sector and of the enterprises, and so we fear very much that we cannot finance the SMEs in future because we don't earn money. That's a real problem. And the next problem is that these back offices in former times, there was these banks for SMEs. They could decide about credits and about these things. Today they have their back offices, which are very strict and in reaction on any credit they are giving. And so the SMEs, they have more and more problems also for getting the money, and even the banks themselves, they cannot help to the SMEs because they have these strong back offices, the BaFin and the back offices who are influenced also by the European Union. And so it will be in some years, in 2–3 years, it will be a real problem for financing the SMEs.
So then, if I right understand, the COVID-19 is showing only problems were already there in the bank sector and the financing of SMEs. And then we would have two phenomena. One, SMEs who don't get money, and one, SMEs who get money too easily. So in both ways.
Now that's a problem. That's low interest rate. That's a real problem, because that's our low interest rates. at the time it's terrible. You know, I give you only a small example. My bank where I was in the supervisory board, where I am in the supervisory board, we didn't take negative interest from our clients. So we got money from the other banks, from the Kreissparkasse, from Volksbank. The people, the clients put the money to our bank, but we have to pay. We have to pay for the money if we put it anywhere to the central bank. So we were forced also to make negative interest. So you see, you cannot decide yourself as a bank. Today you are always in the influence of the whole system.
Thank you very much. So I think because we spoke about the Sparkasse Raiffeisenbank, they are very active in Eastern Europe also. So if we're coming now to a conclusion, I think we should come now to Michael Jäger. Perhaps you can summarize the points we spoke about: digitalization, change of the structures, to see where the supply chains, perhaps new chances from there, and perhaps also dangers. Zombie SMEs, I think, is also one of your topics, but also taxation, that this crisis is not used for the chances we should now take, and that we had before, little small prizes everywhere. Please, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you, because so I summarized, you summarize now. Okay. So double.
You're much more clever and making all your hints.
No. I hope Rolf had to leave. He has an appointment in Augsburg and only 60 minutes left. So I wish him good luck for his 100 kilometers. So I just want to summarize, because I think for me it was very interesting, and also thanks to Martin Kubanov from Hewlett Packard Enterprise, that we see that there's no big difference between the big players and the smaller players. We are all corporates, small and medium entrepreneurs. And I want to start what Ivan also said, access to finance at the end also mentioned, and also less bureaucracy. So we need a way how to finance small and medium entrepreneurs. That must be really a new system to implement. Also a check of Basel, if it's still valid in our times or not. So that's really, I think, really important. But what we also need, what you mentioned, was that this zombie corporates. In former times, you had the interest rates to pay, so you have needed a high efficiency in your corporate. So the money was always going into efficient use. And nowadays, everything is financed. And if you see that a lot of corporates have now huge problems with the shutdown after 2 months, 3 months. So there's a problem with the capital structure of the corporates too. So we need, what was not mentioned today, we need this refinancing, internal financing of corporates. Corporates need a better substance. So the tax system, maybe the plan, the business plan of the corporates is wrong, but I think the tax climate is wrong. So this own resources, we need a better situation for the corporates. That's, I think, what is important. What was also mentioned, efficient use of these public funds now. There was an inquiry of the Libertarian Party in the Deutschen Bundestag that of this ESM money and also Shure program, no single euro was already used. And if you want, you can also send the link to our taxpayers paper available that we talk about 2.6 trillion. We do not talk about billions, trillions now. 2,600 billions are in a how to say envelope of the European Union to finance things. So we need really to control the use of this money. I think that's really important. And also what our colleague said, Milosevic, free market economy. I think that's also important. Fair competition. We need competition. And the question, if we have a split tax rate or not, I think that's from the German experience. I think low tax rates is the best program to boost economy. And if you split tax, and also the digital tax discussion also went to our newest paper, and I will produce a research on the situation. Amazon and others look to the profit margin and the sales margin, what they had. So what was also mentioned today, taxes must be related on profits, not on sales. That's really important. We have tax systems also in competition, and money is a tool, was mentioned, just a tool. And what was also important for me, we miss leadership. In some countries, let's say also in Bavaria, we had leadership. In the other parts, also of Germany, we had less leadership. And also the parties showed that then in some parties we had a leadership and in others less. So we need values, a renaissance of values, and we need leadership. And what was mentioned by Vladimir, it was also important, his 4 points. I hope everybody will get this summary too. So this financial fiscal level, flexibility of rules, and this playing level field, that's also important if we talk about China. If you look now to COVID infections, you don't see in the list China anymore. So they have less than 100,000. It could not be true. So I think that's also important. And the limit of public spending was mentioned, competition of systems. I think that's really, really important. And what was also important for me is we have digitalization, and then this is a really good chance. We use today Zoom. It cannot replace personal individual meetings. You have to look into your eye if you negotiate. Sometimes it's important to sit together. And then what was also mentioned, a chance for Eastern European countries, supply chain, sustainable industries. So that means that what was mentioned in the frequent asked questions. For sure, we need a move from China also back to Europe, a better climate, location factors, and don't miss opportunities. Yes, clean business, that's also important. I think we have really to cooperate. I think we have the big players like the industry and SME, but without SMEs, that's for me what is clear. It's this SME Europe, SME Connect, and also the taxpayers movement is based on SMEs finally, because we are the backbone of society. And I think that's important that we point out, and then in the discussion with the European Commission, that's important also, Ivan, that we always point out, have please a focus on SME, because we cannot leave the country. We will not leave Europe. We are in Europe. And so I think it's a good start. And I wish the growth rates, what are mentioned, our finance minister, Scholz, if we recover soon, but I'm not sure. It will be very interesting now with these zombie corporates, what Horst mentioned, what will happen to the banks with the guarantees, because it's just a start and it's COVID-19. We will have COVID-20 and then other viruses, other challenges. So we must be fit for the future, and that's for me important that we work together. I think it was a good discussion. Thanks to everybody. And international discussion. I can learn something from Poland, from Croatia, thanks to Croatia, and also to everybody who was giving an impact today.
Thank you, Michael, for your conclusion. And now we're coming to the end of this webinar. To final, I have to say, Ivan Stefanec, thank you very much for hosting this event. And thank you also to the speakers. Thank you to Domagoj Milosevic and from Marcin and from Bulgaria, and also from Martin Kubala, Ingo Friedrich. It is also a very good cooperation between SME Europe and the European Economic Senate and the European taxpayers. I think it's fruitful, and I think perhaps we want not only discuss, we are really also doing something. Visit the website of the European taxpayers. They have very good approaches. Go to SME Connect, go to SME Europe. SME Europe is really fighting in legislation and clear outcome for SMEs. So it's not only blah blah and in the air, it's really something done here. And for all SMEs who are listening now here, please send us your messages, your questions, and also your needs you have, because without you and if you knowing what you need, we can also not act in Brussels or in Bratislava or in Munich. We need really your feedback also, your commitment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Horst. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
I wish you health, peace, and no taxes. Okay.
No taxes.
And some wisdom.
But then you don't earn also nothing if you have no taxes. Yeah, you know, one thing is more existing than taxpayers, consumers.
Yes.
Not every consumer is a taxpayer.
True. When you had a tax,
But every entrepreneur should be a taxpayer. Bye.
In a perfect world.
Yes, the perfect.
Yeah.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.